Butler, and this is Inside Creative Writing. I'm here in my office at Florida State University where I teach creative writing. And tonight we're going to begin something rather special, I think. I'm going to write over the next perhaps 15, 16 sessions a new short story, absolutely from scratch. You'll see every comma stroke, every lousy, rotten, awkward sentence, every blind alley, every bad metaphor, all of the mistakes, all of the difficulties, all of the struggle with the intransigence of the English language as I try to shape and refine and explore the vision I have for a new story. And I'm delighted that you're tuning in, and I hope that in watching this process in its fully elaborated detail, that you'll have a chance to understand the creative process better. I teach creative writing here at Florida State University, and I've been teaching for 17 years now in various places. This is my second year at FSU. And one of the things that I emphasize to my students is that art does not come from the mind. Art comes from the place where you dream. And in a sense, then, I'm welcoming you into my dream. I'm going to try to talk in my sleep, as it were. I'm going to do the best I can to offer a kind of commentary as I work. I don't know how that's going to turn out. No one has done this before. And at some point, I'm going to have to just shut up and maintain the kind of trance state that creative writers must nurture in order to get in touch with their dream state and their unconscious. But to the best of my ability, I will try to share this process with you and even comment on it as it's happening. I hope you join us each night from 9 to 11 Eastern Time. I'll be taking Saturday nights off. And I've chosen the story to write tonight only this morning. And I've chosen it from a collection I have of old picture postcards. For more than a decade now, I've collected postcards wherever I could find them, antique malls, junk stores, postcard conventions. But I've collected them not so much for the images on the front, but for the messages on the backs. In the first 2 decades, particularly of the last century, people often poured their hearts out onto the backs of picture postcards. And I've searched hard for examples of this, and I have dozens now. Little bits of human life, full of subtext and innuendo, passions and yearnings that have long since passed into oblivion, but have been preserved now in these few gatherings of words. And to choose this evening's story, I waited until this morning so that I would not even unconsciously have a chance to prepare ahead of time, because I want you to see the whole process as it happens in the moment, in real time. I had it down to 3 finalists today. One of them, for example, was a picture of a young woman and man kissing. It says performance now going on, and it was to a Miss M. Brose in San Francisco, California from Milton. It said, "Dear Matilda, just a line to let you know that I'm still alive. I am not going on that hayride. The young man that wants me to go with his sister-in-law, but she has a cork leg. I'm awful tired. That is the main reason. Regards to all, Milton." That's a very tempting card, and I certainly will write that eventually. But the card that I chose has seized my imagination very firmly. And you can see the card in full. It's what they call a real photo card. You can see the card in full on the website. But let me explain it to you. Somebody, and I think it's a man. I'm going to move forward with that assumption for a couple of reasons I'll explain. But let's say this man has one of those little Kodak Brownie cameras, which were the first mass-produced cameras back in virtually the turn of the last century. And he has photographed something. It's an airplane. This is taken against the sky, and there's a biplane here, a very fragile, very early airplane. And if you look closely, and if you go at some point to the postcard logo in the website, and you pull up the card, you'll see that the upper wing to the right is tearing away. And the message in the back is simple. It says, "This is Earl Sant of Erie, PA, in his aeroplane just before it fell." And this card this morning suggested to me that there is a story here that I'm going to spend now the next several weeks trying to articulate. I don't know at all what emotional effect it might have on a reader. I don't know at all what themes or what ideas might be extractable from the story that would be written. I'm not even sure. What I do know is that there's a character here. And I think it's a man. This is Earl Sant of Erie, Pennsylvania, in his aeroplane just before it fell. It's emotionally unelaborated. And looking at the handwriting and that emotional reticence and understanding the historical period it's from suggests a male narrator to me. And it's his voice now that I'm going to try to find, try to give voice to. Okay, but before we begin, there are probably a couple of other things that I should say. As I write, and of course overnight as well, but even now, those of you who are watching on the internet, and if you're watching on Dish TV, there is a website that you might go to in order to do this, if your preference is to watch on the television screen. But there is an email address, again, at the website to send questions to me. It's now 10 after 9. I'll shortly begin the story. And typically on these evenings, I will reserve the last half hour or so in order to answer questions that you might have for me. Questions about process, questions about the artistic venture I'm in the midst of, questions about the decisions I make. The point of this is to replicate for you and to let you see exactly what the artistic process would be in the privacy of my own writing room. This is a story I was going to write anyway at some point. And to share every moment of it with you is to allow you to see what is normally hidden behind the veil of private life. And so in sending your email questions, I'd be delighted to comment on decisions I've made or remade or unmade during that evening or any other evening. But I would respectfully decline to engage suggestions for what to do next, because the creation of a work of literary art is not a collaborative art. And so, but anything else, any other kinds of questions, anything you want me to elaborate on, I'd be delighted to answer. So I encourage you, starting now, to email me any questions that you might have. Also, as each evening progresses, the following morning, we will be archiving at the Florida State University website for Inside Creative Writing. There will be an archive, so that if you miss an evening, or you want to review an evening, or you want to see the text of what was created at the end of each evening, you can go to that website, you can see the text, and you can actually even replay the webcast from the previous day or any of the previous days. I'd also encourage you to click on some of the other interactive options at the website. There's information, of course, about the creative writing program here at Florida State University. It's a wonderful program, and we give an MA in creative writing and a PhD in creative writing. You can get information about the program, and of course, forgive me the shameless commerce comment, but you can also find links to Amazon and Barnes & Noble to further explore my work if you're interested. Okay. It's time to begin. And one of the first things I think I need to do, because the card does present us with a very concrete person, Earl Sant, S-A-N-D-T. And one of the reasons that I've come to do this project on the internet is that I've used the internet very intensively and extensively in my writing in these very ways, working out details that are hard to find in a normal library situation. So I think the first thing to do now is to go on to Google, which is, of course, my favorite, it's most everybody's favorite browser now. And let's see if there's anything about Earl Sant here. Now, understand that I'm not writing a piece of historical fiction. My interest is in finding the artistic truth and not the literal truth. Carlos Fuentes defined the novel as a pack of lies hounding the truth. And that's about as good a definition as I could find of the novel. The lies that we tell as creative writers are intended to reshape the literal truth of the world into forms that reveal the deeper, universal human truths of our existence. And this airplane falling, I tell you, has a lot of resonance to it for me. And let's see if we can find it. But I think it's worth looking to see if Earl Sant has a presence here. I don't think he was being sued in the state of Florida this October. That definitely a different Earl Sant. Now this is promising. Earl Sant, Brooklyn's original Birdman. You can see the text there for yourself. Jefferson County's first aviator. I might want to take down, here we go. Born in 1888, died in June of 1913. let's assume, I will assume, that this card then is the moment just before his death in June of 1913. I'm reading here. You can see it as well. You know something? It's interesting. When I first bought this card back in January of this year, I merely glanced at it and put it away, did none of the research for it. Last January, I suspect, and I think I even bought it with this in mind, I thought that the short story lurking in this card would be in the voice of Earl Sant. But I have to say, and I think I'm now beginning to see as I look at this card tonight, that something that's touching me about it has to do with the events of last month. An airplane falling. In 1913, places this event on the cusp of a world war. Which has resonance that I think is pretty clear. So this is the moment just before Earl Sant's death. That will be the artistic assumption here. And we're talking about June of 1913. So Sant's background here, I'm glad I know where it is. I'm not sure since indeed now the change is, instead of Earl Sant's voice, the voice that is stirring inside me is the voice of the observer. The one who watches the plane fall. And some of this information then, I don't see this at this point as being things that he would know. Let me scan it. He fell from the plane as it went down. He landed in a garden, but his plane fell on him and broke his leg. He survived the fall, but the break was a compound fracture, and tetanus got into his bloodstream. Well, that may or may not be useful. As I've said, this is a work of art we're creating, and we'll see if surviving the fall and a broken leg are the right things. I don't feel as if they are. Here's another website about Earl Sant and a ubiquitous pop-up ad. Let's get that out of there. Goodbye, Johnny Depp. This old hometown. Paw Paw, Michigan. Brookville, Pennsylvania is what this is about. Where's Earl? Here he is. Earl Sant bought his first airplane. He had hippodromed around. Hippodroming. Barnstorming is another word I think that probably is of that period, but we'll have to check that out. In that regard, by the way, the Merriam-Webster Collegiate Dictionary is particularly useful. And just have a sense of what I'm dealing with right now, because words are terribly important. And if he's hippodroming or barnstorming, I'd like to know that at this moment. So, in the Webster's Collegiate, it's the only American English dictionary that has the years that the words entered the language. Barnstorming entered the language in 1883. So, hippodroming or barnstorming is a legitimate alternative for it. Okay, he barnstormed, falling every now and then, and died in 1913. And I think from what I've known from other readings about early aviation, he may well have fallen a number of times. I'm going to stay with the sense that this was his death. Was known as one of the pioneers of the air, and so forth. We move on to Brookville. Okay. Auction gallery, more legal problem for the other Earl Sant, and that's it. Okay. All right. I want to, he's from Erie, Pennsylvania, but this could be anywhere if he's barnstorming. But let's start with looking, and I've got the Rand McNally Road Atlas here. I want to just look at the lay of the land in Pennsylvania, around Erie, because he could well have been barnstorming near home. W04. And I'm looking for visions of, and I say visions advisedly here. Another thing I have to tell my students frequently is that works of art are sensual objects. And my process, and even as it's going on now, I'm getting very concrete, sense-based images of the man who spoke these words. And I want to see the sensual lay of the ground here. And southeast of Erie here is the Allegheny National Forest. Just something to keep in mind. Okay. What I'm going to do now, I'm one of those writers, and I'm not going to do a Mr. Rogers thing here, but I have, when I write at home, I'm changing into my moccasins under my desk. Part of the process for me is getting comfortable in certain basic ways, and normally I write at home. I'm writing in my office at school, and the heavier shoes now I've changed to my moccasins. I will not sing or change my sweater or sing Mr. Rogers' song for you, but I want to go through a period now, and these are things that I'll often put on paper, but I'm going to put them on the screen here so you can share them. I'm going to make some notes. Just a little, I've often called this, one might call it brainstorming, but I've recently come, because, as I mentioned, the process of creating a work of art is a matter of moving into your unconscious, into your dream space, and not moving toward your powers of analysis and your ideas. I jump on my students for saying they have ideas for short stories. So I call it now dreamstorming. I do a little bit of dreamstorming just to float around in the story a bit, remove from moment to moment writing. And to aid this process and also to aid writing, I like to put music on. Music for me, usually classical music, although depending on what I'm writing, I might use some jazz or other kinds of, or even some sorts of pop music, but mostly without lyrics, of course. But I'm going to turn some music on now. And I do have a program set up on my little Neo jukebox there of American music. This book is rooted in Americana. So I'm going to let the music happen now, and I'm just going to try to put a few things up here that are removed from moment-to-moment writing, but are just notions that may come out of this card, which I'm propping up right here. And I'm going to shut up now for a little bit and try to put some things on the screen. And I'm going to start with these things we just found out from our explorations. Oops. Certain amount of this I find helpful. I may or may not use it. I'm just going to print this out now, actually. And get it off the screen. A little metal hand here. This is the card. The first sentence for me is an absolutely crucial thing, and you may find now, I don't know how long this stage of it might take, but finding the first sentence is which captures the essence of the character and the circumstance. This is a really crucial phase of this for me. And this might be, what I'm reflecting on, what I'm really trying to open myself up to, is this man behind the camera looking into the sky, seeing this impossibly fragile thing, and the man sitting there. As a matter of fact, this is Earl Sant of Erie, Pennsylvania, in his aeroplane. He doesn't even say this is Earl Sant's aeroplane. He's very conscious of the man in the object. And what I'm looking for now, what I have to begin this story, and I tell my students that this is the essential thing in all works of literary art. Fiction is a temporal art form. It exists in time. And I'm very keenly conscious right now of this blank screen, but more importantly of the next blank screen and the next. The burden of narration. When the line length goes on, most poetry is exempt from time because it's an object on the page. The length of the line is part of the form. But when you let the line length run on and you turn the page, you are upon a time, and any Buddhist will tell you how difficult it is, indeed impossible, to exist for even 30 seconds of time on planet Earth without desiring something. My favorite word, as my students will tell you, I bedevil them with it, is yearning. Fiction is the art form of human yearning, and I cannot begin a story without having a deep intuition into the yearning of the central character, and that's the thing that informs the first sentence and every decision thereafter. And as this man looks up into the sky and watches this thing about to fall with his intense consciousness of the man inside, that's what needs to be captured in its essence in the opening of the story and then maintained throughout. This feels right. I feel this character's yearning now. He's seen something terrible, and terrible in a way that he has no frame of reference for. And he yearns to make sense of this event, and indeed, he yearns to make sense of death. And to some extent, do understand that my commentary is a thing that I'm trying, this is all new to me too. I don't think I would not articulate what I've just articulated. I would not even in my own mind articulate that under other circumstances. I want to share as best I can what it is that I'm doing. So I'm in a kind of enforced schizophrenia here. So I'm going to shut up again for a while and put out of my mind the rather analytical thing I just said. But the matter of yearning is terribly important, it seems to me, for an understanding of process. And since that's what I'm trying to share with you in this event, I will do this artificial, terrible thing and abstract the yearning in the way I just did, and now I'm going to forget it. Thank you. Part of my process is to hear the voice. And so I'll frequently read aloud, so you may indeed hear me as I read over my sentences aloud. I've seen a man die, but not like this. There was silence suddenly around us when he disappeared beyond the trees. Silence after terrible sounds, that hammering of his engine, the engine of his aeroplane. He climbed miraculously up, and he had circled the field, and all our hats came off as one, us men. My son cried out too. Hooray, we cried. And Earl Sant hammered overhead and down to the far edge of the pasture, defying the tree. That's a bird that I have I've seen a man die, but not like this. There was silence suddenly around us when he disappeared behind the trees. Silence after terrible sounds, that hammering of his engine, the engine of his airplane, and the other sound after. He had climbed miraculously up, and he had circled the field, and all our hats came off as one, us men. My son cried out too. Hooray, we cried. And Earl Sant hammered overhead and down to the far edge of the pasture, defying the trees, defying the earth. The propeller of his engine spun behind him, and he sat in a rattan chair as if he was on his front porch smoking a cigar. Then he came back from the tree line, heading our way. I touched my son on the shoulder. I had never seen an aeroplane, and I confess it scared me a little. A little doesn't sound like him. Scared me some. I had no premonition, but I needed to touch my son, and the plane came our way, and there was a stiff wind blowing. Now, should I put a comma there? But I needed to touch my son, and the plane came our way, yes. The touch is a separate thing, a separate moment of perception from reconnecting to the plane heading this way, so the comma's there. But I needed to touch my son, and the plane came our way, and there was a stiff wind blowing. The plane liked to soar up and away, way away. I've got way here and away here. But I needed to touch my son, and the plane came toward us, and there was a stiff wind blowing. The plane liked to soar up and away, and it soon would, I thought. I touched my son on the shoulder. I had never seen an airplane, and I confess it scared me some. I had no premonition, but I needed to touch my son, and the plane came toward us, and there was a stiff wind blowing. The plane liked to soar up and away, and it soon would, I thought. Came. Then there was a movement on the wing, with no particular sound, still the engine, but there was a tearing away. If I had been Earl Sant, if I had been sitting in that rattan chair and flying above these bare heads, I might have heard the sound. I lifted my camera. This had nothing to do with the thing happening on the wing. I was only vaguely aware of it in that moment. I lifted my camera and I tripped the shutter. And here was another amazing thing, it seemed to me. A man was flying above the earth. And with a tiny movement with my hand, I had captured him. He was about to die, but he was forever there. He was forever caught there in that box in my hand. I lowered my Kodak, and for a moment the plane was before me against the sky, and all I felt was a thing that I sometimes had felt as a younger man, riding up into the Alleghenies alone. And I turned. One of my little fetishes about writing, a little superstition. Now, it's neither a fetish nor a superstition. What is it? It's a little predilection, say. Is that I like to count words. When I was writing by hand for many years before I finally succumbed to the computer, after every page, I would stop and I would count the words and write the numbers at the bottom. So I'm going to look at the word count now. I think it's a matter also of externalizing an ongoing sense of the rhythm of the piece. I love music, and I've never really played an instrument much, but my son is a wonderful musician, and I feel responsive to music, and I feel that there's something important about my own writing that I've learned from music, and an ongoing sense of the rhythm of things is important to me, and I think counting words has that effect. We're at 389. I think in numbers of words, oftentimes. How many words are being spent in a certain rhythm or phase of motif in a work? It's hard to evaluate sometimes. Right now, I'm in that odd attitude about this, which happens at the beginning. I think things are moving well, but I'm not sure. We'll see. Tomorrow, I'll know better. I'm looking for the right mood here. There we go. Our narrator here is still trying to absorb this thing, and as am I. My hesitation has to do with the event itself. The falling of the plane is rolling itself out here rather fully, and I don't know if that surprises me or it doesn't. Whether he would have moved his emotional center or in the retelling of the story, whether he would have moved away from this yet or not, and then come back to it. But at the moment, he seems to want to tell the full story of the fall first. And I think maybe that's the right thing. I'm going to do a quick read now from the beginning just to feel if the rhythm is right. This time silently. This little metaphor that he attached to the rattan chair has just gone one step too far. The emotional tenor of this moment is not for the narrator to see it as a domestic act. And let's see if the original use of it is also inappropriate, but no. Propeller of his engine spun behind him and he sat in a rattan chair as if he was on his front porch smoking a cigar. At that stage in the story, it's a vivid image. The plane and the pilot are impressing the narrator with it's the sense of ease and command. But now things have gone terribly wrong, and so to press the metaphor here is the wrong thing. The tops of the trees in this photo are clearly pine trees. I think clear. I like the physical world to be as real and accurate as I can make it. The stumper right now is this second sound. The way to, I'm trying to hear it. I'm just trying to hear that sound with the narrator. Let's go back. I've seen a man die, but not like this. There was silence suddenly around us when he disappeared beyond the trees, silence after terrible sounds. That hammering of his engine, the engine of his aeroplane, and the other sound after. He had climbed miraculously up, and he had circled the field, and all our hats came off as one, us men. My son cried out too. Hooray, we cried. And Earl sat hammered overhead and down to the far edge of the pasture, defying the trees, defying the earth. The propeller of his engine spun behind him, and he sat in a rattan chair as if he was on his front porch smoking a cigar. Then he came back from the tree line, heading our way. I touched my son on the shoulder. I had never seen an aeroplane, and I confess it scared me some. I had no premonition, but I needed to touch my son, and the plane came toward us, and there was a stiff wind blowing. The plane liked to soar up and away. Now that sounds like a Fifth Dimension song, ruined by a lyric, that phrase. Up, up, and away. Is that the right rear? Sometimes you get a little dumb on words that you know. And that's not a word at all. Okay, that's why I was feeling bad about it. To rear up is an R-E-A-R. Yes. I'm having a little perception problem here now for him. If it's liking to rear up, how does he perceive that it's liking to rear up if in fact it's not? Let's see when shimmy comes into the language here. 1837. Abnormal vibration. Yep. No. Interesting. The shimmy I'm thinking of is to shake, quiver, or tremble. And it entered the language in 1919. The plane cannot shimmy for a man in 1913. That shimmy must have come out of Shimming Like Your Sister Kate. I think that was the song, which came a little later. Okay. Yes, I occasionally will look in a thesaurus. Not for words that I don't have complete command of, but just words that I'm not summoning up readily. So we've got shimmy here, 877.5. It's not good. We're in the dancing here. Okay. Drawing a little blank here. I need a good horse word. Bolt is the wrong word, but maybe I can get near it here. Nope. Sometimes you draw a blank on a word and you just need to move on for a bit. I just want to see quake. That may work. Let's see. At some point you feel like you're reaching a kind of dead spot in your concentration. And I may be at that moment when we need to move on. We're at 428 words, which is not a bad evening's work. So probably close to letting it pass. And this is the kind of thing that suddenly clears itself up instantly when your concentration returns. The trance state for writing a work of art is intense, and sometimes when it leaves you, it will leave you abruptly. And an hour and a quarter, an hour and a half, 2 hours is sometimes all the work that you can or should do, that after that a kind of law of diminishing returns sets in. But let's, so that may be where we are now, but let's see. I'm going to try this again. Let's look at it again. And sometimes in reading it again, it revives, and we can go on for an extended period more. Although we're almost ready to have enough time for questions anyway. We're probably ready for that. But let's just do one last read through aloud. I've seen a man die, but not like this. Right, let me turn the music off now. I've seen a man die, but not like this. There was silence suddenly around us when he disappeared behind the trees. Silence after terrible sounds, that hammering of his engine, the engine of his aeroplane, and the other sound after. He had climbed miraculously up, and he had circled the field, and all our hats came off as one, us men. My son cried out too. Hooray, we cried. And Earl Sant hammered overhead and down to the far edge of the pasture, defying the trees, defying the earth. The propeller of his engine spun behind him, and he sat in a rattan chair as if he was on his front porch smoking a cigar. Then he came back from the tree line, heading our way. I touched my son on the shoulder. I had never seen an aeroplane, and I confess it scared me some. I had no premonition, but I needed to touch my son, and the plane came toward us, and there was a stiff wind blowing. The plane quaked a little, like a nervous horse, but Earl kept him steady, kept him moving forward, and I felt us all ready to cheer again. Then there was a movement on the wing. I'll have to fix that tomorrow, I think. Keep moving and movement. Let me look now. Let's give it to coming. But the plane, okay, but I needed to touch my son, and the plane came toward us, and there was a stiff wind blowing. The plane quaked a little, like a nervous horse, but Earl kept him steady, kept him coming forward, and I felt us all ready to cheer again. Coming is okay, I think. They're different forms. They don't sound to the ear the same, and indeed, he picks up the same sense of the word, same kind of movement from before, so that's good. Then there was a movement on the wing with no particular sound, still the engine, but there was a tearing away. If I had been Earl Sant, if I had been sitting in that rattan chair and flying above these bared heads, I might have heard the sound. I lifted my camera. This had nothing to do with the thing happening on the wing. I was only vaguely aware of it in that moment. I lifted my camera and I tripped the shutter, and here was another amazing thing, it seemed to me. A man was flying above the earth, and with a tiny movement of my hand, one man was flying above the earth, and with a tiny movement of my hand, of a hand, another man had captured him. He was about to die, but he was forever caught there in that box in my hand. I lowered my Kodak, and for a moment the plane was before me against the sky, and all I felt was a thing that I sometimes had felt as a younger man, riding up into the Alleghenies alone, and there would be a turning in the path, and suddenly the trees broke apart, and there was a great falling away of the land. Somehow I feel that he's going to go back to those mountains in this story, somehow. A falling. He fell, Earl Sant. The aeroplane, at least in his memory. The aeroplane pitched its face forward, and for a moment it seemed to stop and to hang there and the engine hammered on, and then it fell, disappearing behind a stand of pine. Okay, and that's going to be it for this evening in terms of the actual writing. What's going on now is that one of my graduate students will soon, in fact, here he is. That was quick. Hi, Ryan. This is Ryan Walsh, one of my graduate students, who's got your questions here. Thank you, Ryan. Okay. This question is from Richard Bist. And he says, my questions are as follows. Are you finding it more difficult to write in this situation than if you were alone at home in your usual writing environment? Yes. It is more difficult. The difficulty coming from, as I think I mentioned before, I'm not... I talk to myself sometimes, and I think to and at myself at times when I'm writing. But bring myself to articulate, and it's something I feel I need to do to make this the full benefits of this come to you. Engaging my self-consciousness, my analytical faculties in a way, being more conscious at times of my process as it's happening. Those things are things that I've got to do for the moment and then try to utterly put aside, because the creation of a work of art, as I mentioned before, is an engagement of your dream space, is a deep exploration of opening up to your unconscious self. And to the extent that your rational mind gets engaged, that's a danger and that's a hindrance. So that's certainly so. I presume if I made the choice never to say a word to you as I work, ultimately I think my powers of concentration is such that it would probably feel pretty much like it does at home. And I don't know, I will evaluate these words I've written tonight, tomorrow, and see if they feel right, and let's see where they lead. But my general sense of things is that the words went pretty well tonight. And that I was able to maintain that trance sufficiently in spite of the presence of the camera and the virtual audience. Is this situation helping or hindering your creative process? Well, it's not helping the creative process for the reasons I just outlined. The hindering, my sense of things after the first night, and I think as I get more comfortable doing this, because no one has ever done this before, I think it will come more easily still. But I don't feel particularly hindered this evening. Ben Gelston in Atlanta, Georgia, asked, what's the difference between dreaming and thinking about the story? Which is an important and basic question. It's a matter of where in yourself you look for the moment-to-moment flow of your words. The conscious mind, the analytical mind, the thoughtful mind, stories that are created from there are stories that begin with ideas, where you, and in a sense this is a little bit of a dangerous implication I'm giving you, and that's why I'm saying a lot of things to try to counteract it. In a way, here I'm letting the kind of waking dream of my words precede any comments that I happen to make in this very artificial way, you understand. not a thing I would be doing even internally under normal circumstances. But stories that are thought out, the thinking out of a story, comes from the writer looking at a character, and indeed the process of exploring the character follows the analytical track first. You abstract his qualities, you label the emotional content of this character. He's a jealous man, he's an angry man, he's a passionate man, whatever. These are abstractions. The work of art is an entirely sensual thing, and the encounter of the work of art by a reader is an entirely sensual thing. It comes from our dream space. It is a waking dream, and you know dreams are entirely accessed through the senses. A story that is thought out, you will find present in it certain things. First of all, you'll find an abundance of modes of discourse that are non-sensual. You'll find abstractions and summary and generalization and analysis and interpretation. These modes of discourse are antithetical to the work of art, to the artistic experience. The little bit of analysis and labeling that you hear in a story like this, how it comes from the presence, the moment-to-moment sensual presence of the narrator. The narrator's voice becomes a sensual thing in your consciousness, in your ear as you listen. And if if the narrator says, for example, this was not a premonition, that's a kind of analytical thing. But it's in his voice, and he's touching his son, and he's coming to terms with the fact that he has seen this plane fall. And he's coming to terms with the fact that it's happened in a way that surprises him in some awful way. And for him, at that moment, touching his son to say, I did not have a premonition. Meaning, my touch of my son did not mean that I knew this was going to happen. It reveals his personality in ways that I'm not going to abstract. But we have a little flash of insight, a responsiveness to him as a personality. And that is a sensual response. But you'll notice that for the most part, the modes of discourse in this piece, and in all literary fiction, is to create a sensual reaction in you. The essence of the story is accessed through the senses. And those are the things that come from the dream space. And the dreamed story focuses on the yearning of the character. The thought-out story tends not to have yearning present in it, but explores in analytical, abstract ways the problems of the character, the sensibility of the character, the point of view, the attitudes of the character. These are things that the story totally relies on without the dynamic of desire being present in the character. And those are the earmarks of stories that have been willed into being, where the author has created an object from ideas and from a place, in the rational faculty, as opposed to from a place in the unconscious. David Graham writes, it also almost sounds as if you intend a series of postcard stories dealing with early 20th century life. Is this the case? Have you made mental notes, even if not written ones, prior to this webcast? Yes, David. I am, in fact, will be writing a book of stories like this. I've been collecting these cards for over a decade, but I've always been thinking that someday I would choose my favorite 20 or so cards and do a book of stories in the voices of the characters off of these cards, in the way I'm doing tonight. And you're right. I mean, the cards I have span 4 or 5 decades, but I find that by and large the most revealing ones are in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. And so I'm going to choose all the cards that I write from. I will choose from those 2 decades. And I think this is a good time. The zeitgeist, the present tenor of our times is such that I think this is an important time to look back to the comparable time in the last century, because I find that the issues in these cards resonate into a universal human and American experience that is very similar in some really important ways to what we're going through in this day and age. And so they are dealing with early 20th century life, but on their deepest level, they're dealing very much with early 21st century life. As far as mental notes, in terms of this card, I did not have much of an association at all. In fact, the little bit of mental noting that I had perhaps done, it's not so much mental noting as kind of sensibility noting, had to do those things were overridden when I went back to the card. The only thing I had noted really was I had noticed that the plane's wing was tearing. I knew why that plane fell virtually from the day I bought it. But my early noting on this card was toward Earl Sant, as I said. Before I re-examined the card this morning, I would have expected to be writing a story in Earl's voice. I have a sense that this narrator may imagine Earl's voice later on, or at least, if not to speak in it, but at least to imagine what Earl was feeling. But that's a different thing. So the few notions I had about this card were overridden, basically. In terms of the other cards, they're in various states of preparation inside me. I find a lot of the thing that I think you're talking about, the mental noting, again, I would say it's not nearly so much mental as it is subconscious noting. I suspect that when things begin to get into my unconscious to work through toward the creation of stories or novels, that that goes on almost all the time in me on some level that I'm pretty much totally oblivious to. But no, I've not made any written notes, and on any given card, there's very little that I've done that I'm conscious of. I have written 2 of these stories, by the way, already, just recently. In fact, there's an interesting story connected with one, and that is the first story in this book was written from a card. And it was a story that was commissioned by a magazine early in this past summer. They commissioned me to write a story for them, and the magazine was Hemispheres Magazine, an in-flight magazine. And they wanted some fiction in their magazine, and they had read some of my work and liked it and asked me if I would write a story for them. And I agreed, and I took one of the cards, and this was the first of the postcard stories that I've done. Hemispheres magazine happens to be the in-flight magazine for United Airlines. And the story ran in the September issue. And so that story was in every seat back, on every seat, on the plane that slammed again and again and again in our consciousness into the South Tower of the World Trade Center and the plane that went down in Pennsylvania. Which is an utterly trivial footnote to the horrors of all of that. But it's a kind of a creepy feeling for a writer, because when you have a story in print, it's like a little piece of you is out there in the world during the time that it's in print. And it was on that plane. It may have informed my choice of cards here on some, again, unconscious or subconscious level. Okay, here's a question. Earlier you said that and I don't know who it's from, but it says, earlier you said that the events of 9/11 felt connected to Earl Sand's story. Aside from the obvious parallels, plane's disaster, there seems to be a glaring difference between 2001 and 1913. Are you at all imposing the connection on the story? How does this tie into the idea that fiction is temporal? Well, I'm not imposing it yet. Obviously, I was just speaking from certain feelings that I was having about the card. The connections still, I'm not going to use that as a preconceived idea. You've seen nothing so far, of course, that is in an obvious reference to what happens 100 years later. The notion of death, of observing a death, of having an encounter with a vision of death in the fall of an airplane or in the crash of a plane, in a time when, for different reasons, granted, but you have no frame of reference to absorb this, to assimilate it, to come to terms with it. I think these things are clearly paralleled, but believe me, all I'm saying today, and I'm saying only this much because of the admittedly unusual circumstance of my having you here in my presence, in a sense, as I work, and wanting to share the process with you. I would not be saying even this much to myself. I would not be forming the thoughts of these parallels if it weren't for trying to. It would be very much at a deeply impressionistic, sensual level that this would be going on, and it would stay there. The question's implicit concern about imposing these parallels onto this story, I think, are well taken. And I have that same concern, and I will do everything I can in future nights to make sure that whatever instinctive feelings I have about the deep relevance of this story to the present state of our world, that those things will not become didactic or even a clearly motivating factor in how I write it. It does not tie that my use of temporal. It was in a different sense. When I said that fiction is a temporal art form, I'm not referring to times in history. I am referring to the fact that fiction, that the experience of fiction is in time, that the sentences move through the work, that narrative time passes in this art form, unlike poetry, unlike painting, for instance, where it's art, it's color and form and exists out of time. Poetry can exist out of time. Plays, films, fiction are temporal art forms. Time and the passage of time, those things are built into the form. And that's what I mean about fiction being temporal. And the implication of that is, as I said earlier, that fiction is about human beings and it's about human emotion. I think we all understand that as those two things as inescapable characteristics of fiction as an art form. But because it also is a temporal art form, you cannot have human beings and their emotions in time in an art form without coming to the inevitable conclusion that that art form has to deal with yearning, because we do not exist on this planet as feeling creatures in time without at our heart, at our essence, being driven forward by desire, by goals, objectives, by yearnings. Every word we speak, every gesture we make is directed by an objective or goal. Or as I say, in terms of art, my favorite word is yearning. Anthony C. Gregory asks, when writing, do you feel as though you actually become part of your own story, as in almost becoming a character or part of a character who's involved? What advantages does this present to writing a short story? Thanks. Yes, I certainly do feel as if I've become a crucial and central part of the story. For more than a decade now, I've written primarily in the first person, where what I write is in the voice of the main character, as I'm doing tonight. And if you look at my work, I know the critics have all commented on the fact that there's a very wide range of characters in my work. My early training was as an actor. And ultimately, I began to understand fiction, and I had a lot of training as an actor, and taking on the role, and the dominant kind of acting that was taught when I was learning that craft and that art form was the method, was method acting, where the essence of your art as an actor was to make your internal sensory apparatus come into alignment with the internal sensory apparatus of the character that you're creating. And only after doing that would then the external performance result. And in a way, this is the way I teach creative writing, and this is the way I feel that art in fiction occurs as well. That you go into the dream space, into the sensory mechanism, into the moment-to-moment sensual reality of your character, and from there flows all words and indeed all technique and craft too. Those things are downstream from the process of getting inside the character. And indeed, my interest in voice is so deep and profound that I often feel at times when I'm writing well as if I'm almost channeling the voice as opposed to somehow constructing it or creating it. And the advantage of that, of course, is that you create the world in the other, the character. You create it from within, and in creating it from within the character instead of from without the character, you are then deeply rooted in your unconscious and not so apt to slide up into the willful, analytical, idea-driven, conscious mind, where most inexperienced writers write from, and which is, as I've said several times this evening, which is the antithesis of the artist's process. That artists aren't intellectuals. We're not intellectuals. We're sensualists. We live and work and create from our deepest sensual beings. And that means getting inside the character. From Cecilia, Dr. Butler, when you started writing, did you have a picture of the narrator in your head? By that I mean, did you have an idea what he looked like, where he worked, what was his level of education, etc.? I'm curious because it is a first-person narrative and his language would reflect his background. That's a good question, Cecilia. I certainly have a sense of his looks and himself from the inside. What is your own sense of your physical being? I'm not seeing him from the outside. And I have not yet brought myself to describe him physically. Where he works, his education, I'm only discovering it in the process. The object that I'm creating, any work of art, is an organic object. All art is organic. Every tiny detail, every decision you make must resonate into everything else. And I find it not very useful to make up external facts about a character apart from the object itself. If I were to, at this moment, identify his looks, at the moment when his looks or his education or where he works, when those things become organically relevant and crucial, they will present themselves to me. And then they will present themselves in terms of and coming out of all of the organic choices that I've been trying to make up to that point. If I were to, prior to the object's creation, identify and make up such things as his education and his occupation, what he looks like, and then I begin to create the object, that the deeper thing that the object is getting at, that is my own deepest vision of the world. I'm an artist because I have a vision of the world. I encounter the world like everyone else. And I encounter it primarily in the way it's lived, out there in the moment, in our bodies. And I create works of art in order, because if you do that, if you live intensely in your body, in the way life is lived, your first and deepest impression is that the world is chaos. But the artist has a deep sense of conviction and intuition that there is order behind that chaos. And I create this object in order to articulate that vision of the meaning of things behind the chaos. And if I make up these things outside of that vision, and then I'm beholden to those things, and I try to make the object shape itself to these imagined things that were created outside of that vision, then the object itself begins to fall apart. Those things must be served within this special object in order to further that work of art. And so they will come in due time and not ahead of time. Well, I see we're running out of time, and I'm delighted that we've got some more questions. I'm going to try to deal with these tomorrow. And please continue to write your questions and send them to me. I'm delighted you joined us this evening, and I invite you to come back tomorrow evening at 9 p.m., and we'll see where this story leads. I don't know either. Thanks again, and we'll see you tomorrow night.